Live. Welcome to Ian's room, fellas, ladies, gentlemen, whoever you are, they, them, whoever you are, welcome to the stream. Today's what? Monday, the 12th of January, 2026. Start of the year, another day, another live stream. It is what it is. Now, you see the title. Hitting rock bottom with women was a blessing in disguise. Now, before I get started, if you don't know who I am, my name's Ian. I'm 28 years old, about to turn 29 in a few weeks. But yeah, I'm a regular guy, normal guy. I had a background in economics. I would consider myself to be an introverted guy, a fairly logical guy, bit of a deep thinker as well. But I know how to have a laugh as well. And if you can't tell by my accent, I'm from the UK. And yeah, I had a pretty terrible dating life for pretty much most of my adulthood or adolescence and adulthood, and I'll be getting into that a little bit in this stream. But I yeah, didn't find much success with women, especially in recent years, despite the fact that on paper people would look at me and say that I was fairly successful, I had a well-paying job, a fancy job title. I lived in a fairly prosperous country. Had and still have my own apartment, bought my own house or bought my own apartment. Um, and I had a good friendship group, fairly social guy, even though I'm introverted. And one guy in the stream already. Nice. Thank you for the like, brother or sister. Um, but yeah, no, yeah, despite being fairly successful on paper, dating life did not reflect that at all. Um, and it's Mo. What's up, Mo? Shout out to Mo, a loyal soldier. Um, yeah, dating life wasn't great, and that was quite frustrating. But then I found Cold Approach. I found Daytime Cold Approach, and I put myself into the fire. Went out there into the streets, got my ass kicked a few times, or quite a few times, and eventually found a way to get better after lots of reps, iteration, eventually getting coaching by a guy called Ephraim, who runs a channel called Pool University. And yeah, as a result of all that intervention and action, I transformed my dating life, and yeah, it's much better now. I've had a bunch of experiences over the past 6 to 12 months, and they've just gotten better and better and better. I've gained way more confidence as time has gone on. And right now, I'm seeing a girl in London who I really like, beautiful, interesting, my kind of girl. And yeah, life is looking fairly good at the moment. So yeah, I started this channel just to document that whole process, my thoughts on cold approach dating, um, and yeah, hopefully to inspire guys to, make changes of their own and transform their own dating lives, because I think this is a really important part of life. And if you disagree, then you can argue with your fridge. But yeah, so let's get right into it. So, like I said earlier in the stream, the title is Hitting Rock Bottom with Women Was a Blessing in Disguise. Now, so obviously, I'm sure anybody watching this stream, if you're a human and not an AI bot, then, we've all had tough phases in life, tough seasons, and in those seasons, we can, find ourselves in a fairly sticky situation where, you know, everything seems pretty bleak, or we're a little bit afraid about how we're gonna navigate ourselves out of this, let's say, pit. And people talk about rock bottom, whether it's financial rock bottom or relationship rock bottom, or maybe, I don't know, if you're in university and you failed all your exams, you feel like it's the end of the world, right? And it's one of those things where you life happens, and life can kick us in the teeth a million different ways. And it's basically up to us to try and dig ourselves out of those tough situations, right? And it's of course in the moment rock bottom feels really hard to get out of, because of course there's a lot of fear in there in that situation, a lot of doubt, uncertainty. Maybe you're even afraid of being judged by other people. You can imagine somebody who's, I don't know. Let's take a really understandable example for, you know, the masses, like your average alcoholic, right? Let's say you're an alcoholic, and you know you've been drinking for many years, and then it became an issue, and all of a sudden your addiction to alcohol has bled into your work, your family life. All of a sudden your kids hate you. Now, I don't want to get too dark, but the point is, these vices or these situations can be pretty dark, and they can take you down a really negative path. And then all of a sudden your wife left you, your kids left you, your workplace fired you. You've spent all your life savings on alcohol and all this sort of thing, and you find yourself in that really bad place where it kind of feels as if you can't get any lower, right? And of course that's an extreme example, but and so it's hard. You look at that situation and you go, I wouldn't want to be that guy, right? And of course I understand that, because that's a pretty tough place to be, right? um but I think sometimes, in my experience, right, having hit several rock bottoms, let's say one or two, one of which is dating, which I'll talk about in depth in the next few minutes or so. um but hitting rock bottom is just a part of life, right? I think everybody hits some sort of rock bottom at some point. Of course it varies to different degrees, and in that moment you're kind of faced with a choice, right? It's like, okay, a lot of people there's basically two paths, right? A lot of people either just they go even further down the negative path, and they go a level below rock bottom, which is just like complete despair, and they don't even get back, and they become cynical. And for, of course, in the alcohol example, that can lead to really bad consequences. Obviously I'm not going to get too dark about that, but the point is, some people just never come out of that pit of despair, and it's pretty rough for those people, right? And my heart goes out to them. And so essentially you've got that one archetype of person who just falls down that pit, and it gets worse and worse and worse. But then you have another side of the equation, right? Somebody else who hits rock bottom and is faced with themselves and has to really think about all their choices, and they decide, okay, this is pretty bad. I've not been here before, and I'm therefore going to do everything I can to get myself out of this hellhole, right? And to push forward into crafting some sort of a better future, right? And I think this is where this kind of person, right, if they stick on that path long enough, comes to realize, after hopefully getting out of the situation, that that rock bottom was kind of a blessing, right? And I'll dive a bit deeper into why I think that is, especially in my life. And I'm just going to basically use my example with dating. Um, and so that is a caveat that I wanted to drop, which is rock bottom is only a blessing for a certain type of guy, right? And that kind of guy is somebody who, isn't going to, completely blame the world or other people for his or her problems. And, they're going to basically do whatever they can to get out of the situation and remain optimistic, even though objectively their reality is very, very poor, very shit, very tough to deal with, right? And so I guess you could call that kind of person resilient, optimistic, determined, motivated, um, you know, uh, fairly courageous, right? There's all these different character types or character traits that we can associate with that kind of person. And look, we've seen these kind of individuals in movies, right? This is what all the great stories are about. You think about someone like, I don't know, like I'm a Batman fan, or I like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight series. You think about in The Dark Knight Rises, when Batman is in that sort of like hole, in that cave, and like Bruce Wayne is just, of course, he's being starved, basically a prisoner, and he's with those other inmates who are trying to get out of that hole, and then eventually he gets out of it, right? And you know like you could argue that for Bruce Wayne in that moment, that was his rock bottom, right? And he had to really dig deep and find that drive from within, whatever that is, and use that, let's say, fuel or fire or hope to, get out of that hellhole and save Gotham from Bane or whatever. So the nerd in me is coming out hot and heavy early in the stream. Jeez. um. Anyway, so you know, there's that kind of guy, right? And that's the kind of guy that I would consider myself to be without blowing too much smoke up my ass. Just purely based on the fact that I've been at rock bottom and I've found a way to get out of it. It doesn't mean that I'm always perfect, but I found a way. And so I guess the next question is, okay, so assuming that you're that kind of guy, then why is hitting rock bottom for you a blessing, right? Because like I said, it feels pretty shitty in the moment, right? Um, but I think it's a blessing for two main reasons. And the first one is aggressive action, right? So I think when you hit rock bottom, particularly in your dating life, for this kind of individual, it essentially spurs you into aggressive action. Because I found that, if I'm in a place where things are okay, they're not too great, but they're not too bad, then I can make changes here and there. I can flirt with the idea of, making changes to my life, but I think the pain it's not significant enough to spur me into proper action. And one thing that I think is an issue nowadays is, and I think a lot of us say that we're putting in reps, that we're putting in work, that we're acting, in our best interest by, you know, really putting ourselves out there, right? But when you really drill down into it, it's like, are we really doing everything we can to mobilize our lives and to change our situation? So in the dating context, are we really, you know, to be fair, like, let's just like use the red pills sort of ideology for a second. But if I'm trying to improve my odds of being a better partner or a more attractive guy in the dating market, am I really maxing out all the different areas of my life, fitness, money, social skills, and of course the actual part of getting the dates, which is either doing cold approach, going to nightclubs, or maximizing my dating app profile, right? Regardless of which avenue you agree or disagree with in terms of how to improve your dating life, the question is, ultimately, am I really putting in the work? Yeah, like, am I really taking aggressive action to get my desired goal? And I think that a lot of the times we all say that we are, but I don't think we are. I don't think we're actually moving mountains. But I think at rock bottom, it's a lot easier to be like, all right, let me just throw the towel in and just go balls deep, all in, no questions asked, fully send it, not give a fuck about whatever happens, because it can't get worse. So now I have this, like, I think people call it like an activation energy, right? Now I have this like pure drive, arguably fueled by fear of getting even of it's arguably fueled by fear of going even more below rock bottom. But regardless of what the emotion is, it doesn't to me, it doesn't really fucking matter. Point is, it actually gets you off your ass and forces you to really take proper action. And I really want to emphasize that proper part, yeah, like aggressive action, right? Not a few things here and there, not a few approaches here and there, but proper action, right? So that's the first blessing. And then the second blessing, in my opinion, is humility. So when you hit rock bottom and you're at that really low point, there is a certain level of humility that you gain from hitting that rock bottom. And humility is an interesting one because I always used to think that humility was just anybody could be, let's say, humble by just, downplaying their achievements, reducing their ego and, you know, sort of tiptoeing around their success and trying to make other people feel better by being humble in certain rooms, right? But that's like a low grade definition of humility. Like, to me, true humility is, I think, to be honest with you, it's just essentially the ability to uh, see yourself for what you really are after hitting like a low point. Because actually, the nerd in me decided to look up the etymology of the word humility, and it comes from a Latin word which I think is humus or humus, um, and I think it means lowness. So humility comes from a Latin word that's defined as a lowness. And so what does that mean? Well, I think that means that, humility is something that you discover at your lowest points. And why is that? It's because all this egotistical all these egotistical ideas of who we think we are, or who we think we should be, or how we think the universe should react to us, or how we think other people should treat us, all of that at your lowest point loses all meaning, all relevance, all significance, because at the end of the day you're in a shitty place. And so all of that pretense is out the window, and it doesn't matter anymore, right? Now you're just faced with you in this shitty situation, and you're humbled. You're rightfully humbled, right? Because all the things that you think about yourself, oh, I'm a cool guy, I have this cool job title, I live in this place, I've achieved these things, I'm this talented, yada yada yada. It doesn't matter, right? And so you're humbled at that low point. And rock bottom provides that humility, right? And again, I think this is a blessing, because once you gain that humility, then you kind of realize that you don't actually have anything to lose in that moment. So if you have nothing to lose, then you have everything to gain, and then you just basically start taking proper action. And I think that's a real blessing, because if you tie the humility with the aggressive action, then what does that leave? It basically allows you to do whatever it takes to get to where you want to get to. And nowadays and then in that moment going forward, you don't really have all that let's say baggage behind you. It's just the case of, okay, we're just going to fully send it and go all in, and I'm going to leave it all on the table. And so having now laid out those, let's say, components of you know the components behind why I think uh, rock bottom is a blessing. Having now laid that out, I want to talk a bit about my experiences, right? Let's say my dating related rock bottoms, because again, I think looking back, they've actually been quite helpful, which I hope is useful, because then of course you can look at your rock bottom, if you're at a rock bottom or you were just at a rock bottom, in terms of dating, because then you have a little bit more perspective, a bit more positive, forward looking perspective on how this will hopefully lead to better outcomes in the future. And so therefore you can hopefully be a bit more accepting of your current situation. Because the only difference between, let's say, me and you, let's say you're somebody who's watching this right now, I don't know who's watching, but let's say that you're somebody who's at like a low point. Like, you might think you're different to me in the sense that, well, I'm at a, let's say, a higher point than you are, but the reality is that I used to be where you are, and then I just got through different phases by sticking to the plan, or just by continuously believing in the process, and then I eventually arrived at this point. But so you might be at a different stage now, but I'm trying to like basically put myself back in your shoes, because I was in those shoes not too long ago. So let's get into that actually. So the first rock bottom in my dating life that I want to talk about was actually my first heartbreak. So I've only ever had one girlfriend since I started shooting my shot, and this is a girl that I met at university when I was going to university in London studying economics, and I met her at a what we call a like a ESOC event, which is basically like an East African Society club. So in universities in the UK, there's different social clubs. Like, you've got the rowing club, you've got the football club, you've got the chess club, but then you've also got clubs that are dedicated to different student bodies, geographically speaking. So you might have the South American Society, you've got the Australian Society, and then so we also had the East African Society, right? And so I met this, fairly good looking. I say fairly good looking. She was good looking well, at the time I thought she was attractive, although looking back, like, she wasn't the best that I wanted. But to be fair, I thought she was cute, and I still think she's cute, to be fair. Um, but the point is, I met her at that party. We book first friends. at first, first few months, we went on the same lectures. We didn't cross each other that much during my entire year because this is when I was doing my master's. So it's a 1 year program. And so we hung out a little bit in the first month of knowing each other. Every now and then would bump into each other at parties systematically throughout the year, but we never really spent time together in any sort of romantic way. And then in the summertime, close to when I graduated, we started spending more time together because we would bump into each other in the library and would, talk a bit, go back and forth. And then eventually when I graduated, she was on a trip. She came back to the UK. I sent her an Instagram DM, told her I want to take her out for a date. One thing led to another, and then we became partners, right? And long story short, the relationship started fairly well, but then for many different reasons, one of which was I was in a very scarce mindset and I was also quite desperate and needy. I eventually made the mistake of cheating on my girlfriend, and of course, I still regret that massively. And the relationship took obviously a massive hit after that. And she still stayed for a few more months, but then the relationship was never the same. So eventually she decided to call it quits and broke up with me, right? And this was around COVID. So this was literally 2020, halfway through 2020. So I was living in my apartment by myself. This is rock bottom now, right? So she calls me. She's like, "Look, Ian, I know we've tried to make it work, but this is it. I can't do this anymore," right? And so she ends it there, and we never see each other again. And I remember just being like really down bad. Yeah, I was already living alone. Quarantine was still going on, so I couldn't even meet or see my friends or my family. So I was dealing with all of this by myself, right? And it was rough, right? I did the usual heartbreak type shit, right? Going through the old photos, and then the photos were too much to bear, so I delete all of them. And then I'm thinking about all the times that we had, even though the relationship was really only 6 months at that point. But point is, she was my first ever girlfriend, right? And that was a really tough, depressing time of my life. Arguably the first time I probably really felt depressed and pretty like shit. And so yeah, it was pretty rough, right? And then at that moment, I remember that's when I came across the red pill, right? And so you know, I I started getting into self improvement. And for all the bad things that we could say about the red pill, I think it certainly helped me in so many different ways because I was so down bad that I had this fuel. Again, I had this desire for aggressive action to improve my life and to get out of that negative spiral. So I started going to the gym. I know I don't look like it, but I started going to the gym. I, took my health way more seriously. I started eating healthy. I stopped drinking. So I basically had a 3 year break where I didn't drink any alcohol for 3 years. I think it even got to 3.5 years. Um, and so I stopped drinking. I stopped, like, I really tried to stop watching porn. I went on that whole no fap journey. Um, what else did I do? I started reading more, meditating, journaling. I mean, I have tons of journals in my room. I mean, I could probably bring them out, but I don't want to end the live stream here. But like, I would do all these self improvement tactics, right, to improve my mental health, to improve my self esteem, to obviously look more attractive by going to the gym, have more energy and feel better generally in terms of my well being by eating healthy food and cooking my own meals, meal prep. Obviously, reading books to increase my wisdom, my knowledge, my productivity, and I was doing all of these different activities, right? Good habits, right? And that all spurred from that rock bottom place after my girlfriend cut things off with me. Yeah. And so that was the first, let's say, rock bottom that I really experienced in my dating life. And that was tough, but again, it resulted in a more disciplined version of Ian being born out of that difficulty, right? So it was a blessing because I don't think I would have had so much pain and despair to fuel me to do all of that. Because think about that, like that's a lot of changes. Again, I'm not trying to like show off, but that's a lot of changes all at once. Yeah, but I was so down bad that to me it was like I don't really think I have a choice, right? So that was the first heartbreak. And then fast forward a few more years, around 2024, so 2024 March. So this is around the time when, so I took a break. So between being broken up with by my ex-girlfriend and 2024 March, I decided um to basically like not date. So you'll notice how I mentioned all those good habits, right? But in reality, I so yeah, you'll notice how I, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. So you'll notice how I listed all those good habits in terms of what I implemented in my life, but I didn't mention anything about dating, right? So I made an intentional choice to not involve myself in any type of dating, no dating apps, like no shooting my shot. Now, granted, part of that was because I was in that red pill space, so I didn't feel like I was enough as I was, even though looking back I was. But I didn't feel like I was enough. I felt like I had to gain more muscle and do all these things to improve my value, my SMV, to become a high value man. So yeah, it took quite a few years, 3 years specifically, and just completely disconnected from dating. I had a few. I had one in that 3 years. I think I had, yeah, one hookup or two in. I had two hookups in like 2021. Um, and yeah, those were like from house parties, and not the highest quality girls, I'll admit. But yeah, that was about it. Because then after that, I went on a 4 year dry streak until literally halfway through last year, which was obviously through Cold Approach. So I went on a 4 year dry streak just to put that out there for the people. Now, so just rewinding back. So having taken that break from dating, I got to a point in early 2024 where I decided to put myself back out there a little bit. And so part of that was going on dating apps. So I signed up to Hinge, and then luckily, I want to say like after 3 days of being on the app, I matched with this really attractive girl, really attractive, like, fairly. I mean, honestly, if I'd seen her in the street like tomorrow, I would probably cold approach her, right? And so I rematched, and she actually was responsive, and we were talking, and we had all these like interests aligned together, right? Like, to me, after 1 week of talking to her on text and FaceTiming, I was like, she's the one. Yeah, like this girl is like, she's cool, she's attractive, we get along, we laugh, and there's so many similarities. Like, she was into philosophy, reading, self improvement, development. I was too. So to me, on paper, I was like, oh, this is the girl. Like, I'm so lucky, right? And you can imagine that in my head, I'm still operating from that scarce, needy position. So as time is going on and we're trying to set up a date, like my attachment to this girl who at that point I'd still never met was growing by the day, by the by the hour, to be honest. And it's funny, I think I've recently looked at my text threads from that uh, interaction with her, because I was curious, and you can just see the neediness, from top to bottom. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's embarrassing because I was just at a certain point in life. It is what it is, and I had to go for it. But we can just see the neediness, right? And so eventually we go on a date, and the date didn't go great, but it didn't go poorly. Um, but after the date, she got back home, I got back home, and she was like, "I still want to see you again," and I said the same. And then eventually things just didn't work out. She got really busy because she used to do like ballet, and she would go to different because she was still in university, so she would go to different ballet competitions around the country. And so on weekends it was very difficult for us to set something up, and she just made it quite difficult to do it even when she was free. And so I kept trying and trying and trying to set something up, and it just never worked. And then eventually she just, let's say like 3 weeks after our first date, as I'm still trying to set up the second date, she messages me and says, "Yeah, this is a really bad time. I'm just not ready to date right now, and I'm done." And that was like rough, right? Um, and also another thing to note, actually, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but after our first date, I remember going on Hinge again, right? And going on her profile and seeing that right after our first day, she changed her pictures. So she added more pictures. She improved her profile. And that was like a bit of a gut punch because I realized, okay, she's still keeping her options open. and it seems as if after the date she decided, yeah, I'm not sure if I really like him. I'm gonna try and talk to other people, which of course is fine. Like that's her decision, and she's allowed to do that because it's not like we were anything serious or it's not like we were exclusive to each other. But of course, again, like the insecure, needy part of me took that as a, oh, she doesn't really like me at all, and she wants a more attractive guy, a more, I don't know, a more muscular guy, more cool guy, more funny guy, more better looking guy, whatever trait I felt insecure in, add it to the list, right? And so yeah, she eventually said she didn't want to continue, and that was that. And I remember getting that text. I remember I was in my room here, and I was just like, I remember lying on my bed, seeing the entire paragraph, and just being like, damn. I just felt like, geez, like just when I thought I had it, just when I thought that I was out of this dry spell, just when I thought that I'd met the potential love of my life, just when I thought I met the one, I just get slammed, you know, and back to square one, right? And of course, on Hinge, I wasn't getting any other luck. So that was clearly a lucky match. That was the one time in my life the algorithm actually gave me a bit of a layup. Um, and so, yeah, I just remember feeling really down, feeling hopeless. I mean, I remember just being in my room with the lights off, just thinking, "Oh, this is terrible." Like I've made an intentional choice to put myself back out there. I remember spending so much time curating a dating profile, like getting the best pictures. I think I even remember like I had like a little like tripod thing, and so I would use my camera tripod to take pictures in my room. These like cool pictures of me with like a full outfit on, and I would obviously spend a long time trying to like figure out the wittiest cool prompt on my Hinge profile, and it didn't pay off, right? And I was back to square one, and yeah, that was pretty tough to deal with, right? But again, right? So this is rock bottom, right? Another rock bottom. And, you know, what I decided to do at that point was I went online and I started looking at different types of dating content, right? And I would watch all these other dating coaches and they would talk about dating in terms of, you know, the dynamics between men and women, but they were never talking about how to actually get dates, right? Until I came across a few cold approach videos and I specifically came across Social Animal, right? But at that point, because I was so low, I was just focused on finding alternatives, right? So again, this was kind of the aggressive action. I said no to dating apps and I said I'm not doing that again. Like I don't find success, so I've given up on that route. That doesn't work for me. So instead I was like, okay, what I can do is I can find other content and see how other guys in my position have got themselves out of this pit, right? So I was at rock bottom, but I wasn't completely hopeless, right? And so that pushed me into searching for alternatives. And voila, what do you know? I find Code Approach, right? So again, that's another moment where at that point, I could have just given up entirely and been like, okay, I'm just going to keep on banging out the gym. I'm going to keep on trying to max out other areas of my life, try and make more money, and then eventually I'll find success on Hinge or Tinder, or maybe I'll be lucky and I'll find a cool girl as part of my social circle in London. But I said, nah, screw that. I'm gonna try another alternative, right? And when I found Code Approach a few months later, right, through Social Animal and Ruben, I had so much, I had a lot of energy, right? I had a lot of desire and drive to try it because I'd already experienced the rock bottom after being rejected and cut off by the Hinge girl. So I'm like, okay, this is my only alternative. I've already been humbled by her and I need to take aggressive action. So this seems to be the best route presented to me at this point in time, unless somebody else came and gave me another alternative. And so I I used all that pain again. And granted, before starting Code Approach, I had a little bit of sorry, before starting Code Approach, I'd sort of laid down the foundations early on, by doing things like improv and talking to strangers and you know also like going to networking events. So I was putting myself out there. But again, this is related to the aggressive action, right? Because one thing I'd noticed after the Hinge situation was I'd already been, I wasn't really socially, let's say, I wasn't as socially capable or warmed up as I used to be before I came across self improvement. Because I think one of the issues that let's say, or the trap I fell into with self improvement after my initial breakup with my ex was that my socializing kind of went down a bit. It wasn't completely gone, but I was very much like in that, what were they calling it? Like that, like, lone wolf, like just grinding it out in your room, gym in the morning, come back, meal prep, cook, read, and then like rinse and repeat that day after day, right? And my social life took a bit of a back seat, right? Which in hindsight wasn't a good idea because I lost a lot of social momentum, and I was already introverted and I was already living alone in my own apartment, so I didn't really have too many people to talk to. And I would just decline invites to this place and that place because I was like, nah, I'm grinding out. I'm trying to start a business. I'm trying to, focus on gym. I don't want to drink. Of course, I wasn't drinking, so I didn't feel, obliged, or I didn't feel motivated to go out to parties and clubs. So my social fiber, my social muscle took a bit of a hit, and it started to lose its, let's say, strength. So after having that Hinge situation and then thinking about cold approach in between those two periods, I started putting myself out there more, right? And again, that was again because I had so much activation energy from the rock bottom period before, that I was like, I need to do whatever it takes to make me capable of being able to talk to women out in public, or being able to talk to women anywhere, really, and just putting myself out there as much as possible. So I did that. I even remember buying a book by Mark Manson. I think it's called Models. And so that was like basically, a whole book about how to attract women. And to be fair, it was an old book. Like he wrote it in 2015, I think. But you can see where this is going, right? Like I was doing as much as I could, or I was doing a lot more than I would have done before. And then I come across Cold Approach, and boom! Of course, Cold Approach is way more intense, right? I mean, that was that was an intense experience from the beginning, right? I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I was driven enough, and I wanted to take aggressive action, so I went all in, right? Or at least at the time, went all in based on the information I had available to me, right? And what did that look like? Well, I would go out every weekend, right, and do solo approaches. I would go to central London when the weather was good, because this was around September time in 2024. So I would go and, you know, go out to Covent Garden, central London, stay there for an hour or two, do approaches, as many as I could, whenever I had the courage, come back, and then I would kind of go through my approaches. So I used to have I still have this notes list on my iPhone, and I would just jot down all the approaches, right? And I would list them. I would write the brief description on the girl, what kind of happened, or the approach itself, anything I kind of learned from it, and I would just do this week by week. I would go out and do this again and again and again, right? Now, of course, so there was an improvement in my dating life after starting Cold Approach, because I gained more confidence, and I eventually started to get dates around February of last year. Um, but I still had low points, right? So I remember the first issue was flakes. So girls were flaking on me, right? So in the first 3 months, um, I didn't actually get any dates, even though I was getting numbers, because all the girls were flaking on me, right? So I couldn't actually get girls to respond to me when I got their numbers. So that was a low point. It was really frustrating. I mean, I remember I would drive back so I'll be driving to London to either see friends or to do improv, and I would be like anxiously waiting to hear a response from the girl that I texted the night before, and I would just hear nothing, like crickets, absolutely nothing. And that would be very disheartening, right? Because you can imagine you're always going out, going out, going out, putting myself out there, taking those hits, and then getting the hope after getting the number, and then realizing that it didn't go anywhere, right? So that was the first low point. And then even once I started getting dates, I remember one time where, because all the dates that I got before getting coached, the best that I was able to get was like a kiss, um, by a few of the girls. But I remember there was one time when I went on like 3 dates in 1 week, which was a high, right? That was like a successful, let's say, like achievement, right? I mean, 3 dates in 1 week, that's pretty good considering that I could barely get one date in 3, 4 years, right? So, and all those dates happened, but then literally all those three girls were no longer interested after the second date, after the first date, sorry. And I remember two of those girls, they basically texted me after our first date, and they were like, "I didn't feel a romantic connection, so I don't want to continue things further." Like, imagine getting that text twice in a row in the same week, back to back by different girls. Yeah. And of course, at this point, like, I'm getting in my head, right? I'm like, oh, these dates aren't going anywhere. Clearly I'm doing something wrong on these dates. They're not really seeing me as that kind of guy that they'd want to, either continue things with in a medium term to long term relationship direction, or they don't even see me as the kind of guy that they'd want to, hook up with or whatever. Like, it was very difficult to, basically achieve like a happy ending and get what I wanted, right? And of course, I'm getting in my head at that point, and then things got worse at that point because sure, it was frustrating to not see the dates progress further than I wanted them to. But then the issue got even worse because, at the very least, I was getting dates, right? So at least I was getting dates, right? But then eventually I had a 3 month rut across late spring and summer where I wasn't getting any dates despite going out to approach. Now, granted, it's funny because looking back, I wasn't putting in as much volume as I could have been, but I was certainly still putting in work, right? And I was putting in the same amount of work that I was putting in before when I was getting dates, right? Um, and so I just hit a rut where I wasn't getting any dates, no traction, and that was when I was like at a low point, right? Because even in that period, I think right before that period, I there was a girl that I was seeing, and even though we hadn't escalated it to where I wanted it to go in terms of happy endings and getting laid and having like a proper relationship, it got to a point where if I'd continued things with her, it probably would have gone down that direction. But I realized that I wasn't actually that into her. I wasn't that attracted to her. And so I made a tough decision to cut things off with her, right? Even though that she could have been easily like my next, let's say, short-term girlfriend, I looked at the situation and I thought, I don't know if I really like her that much, and I don't know if I'm ready to put in all this work just to like get laid by her. Like, I just thought I want better than this, right? And so I cut things off, and that was the beginning of the 3 month rut, which is crazy, right? Because in the back of my head, I knew that there's always the risk that if I cut things off with her, then who knows when I'm gonna meet somebody else, right? And it's kind of like the universe went, okay, we're gonna teach him a lesson, yeah. And so that's when that 3 month rut started, and that was like that was the rock bottom, right? Because I'd already put in all this work. I'd already, been battered out there in the streets, found some success, and then more lows and ups and downs. And I was really starting to question myself. I would even think to myself, all the dates I had before were just luck, and that those girls were just giving me a date because I was courageous, but they didn't really want to, be with someone like me. And I would just have these like really, let's say, bad moments, and I'd spiral and I'd just feel terrible, and I lost a lot of motivation. And even though I was still going out, I don't think I was going out with the same enthusiasm. And so I hit that rock bottom, and then guess what I did eventually, right? In that rock bottom, those dark nights of the soul, I decided, okay, aggressive action, right? I've been humbled for multiple months during the summertime when things are meant to be going well. What can I do next? And through the lens of aggressive action, I said, okay, there's a guy that I've been following online, Ephraim. He's got a great channel. I love his content. Why not reach out to him? He just started a paid community, right? Why not reach out to him and see if he can help me out, right? And it's worth noting, guys, that I've always been like someone who tries to do stuff by themselves, like a kind of lone wolf type of guy. I don't. I'm not completely averse to reaching out for help, but I think I certainly have struggled to do that in the past. You could argue part of it is ego, and a part of it is I don't want to admit that I'm struggling. Because I even still kind of find it difficult to tell people that I'm struggling with stuff. I tend to keep stuff in a lot, and so I and so you know you have to understand that me reaching out for help was like I had to really think about it, right? But at that rock bottom, I was like, it can't get any worse than this, and I kind of feel like the walls are closing in on me, and I've already committed to cold approach because I've been doing it for so many months now. So I should just go the next route and do whatever I can to get out of this pit. And so coaching was that, right? And so I reached out to Ephraim, and I was, in the community, pretty quickly. And we were doing one-to-one virtual coaching. And, eventually, having done one-to-one coaching for a few weeks, I, miraculously, what do you know? I implement his feedback after our calls, and I meet a girl out here where I live. We go on one date, have a great time, make out in the coffee shop. Although there weren't people there, so before you all get weird about it, we made out in the coffee shop because it was empty in broad daylight. And then after that, we go on a second date, get drinks, and then she comes back to mine. And I end my 4 year dry spell, right? I end my 4 year dry spell. That was around like July of last year. And then, of course, I go to Belgrade, do the immersion with Ephraim, get coached in person, gain way more confidence, come back to London. I then eventually meet the girl that I'm seeing now. And then I also had a few other like hookups and experiences. And then I go to Thailand, and then, you can go on my channel, you can see the experiences I had in Thailand. Um, and then I go to Kenya in December, and then I had an experience in Kenya in New Year's. And so everything just got better after that point. But if we're reverse engineering all these good outcomes, right? All these positive romantic experiences, getting laid, having a London girlfriend who I like and like and admire and get along with really well. Like if we're reverse engineering all these positive experiences, what's the source? The source was the rock bottom, right? It was the rut. It was the 3 month dating rut where things weren't going anywhere, and I decided to take action, aggressive action. And so again, that's another blessing, right? That was a blessing in disguise, because if I didn't have that rock bottom, let's say, phase, then who's to say that I would have ever reached out to Ephraim? And I reached out to Ephraim at a time when, you know, I guess he was sort of starting his coaching journey. And so I got a 5 day immersion, and, the stars just basically aligned, right? And and so I'm just glad that I had that experience, because it pushed me to go a step further, right? And so I made that point earlier in the stream where I was like, a lot of us say that we're putting in reps, but are we really putting in reps? Are we really doing everything we can to improve our dating lives? And I think oftentimes the answer is no. And it's not easy because time is limited, and we can only give so much energy to different parts of our life. Like, we're working, we have family commitments, we have other issues that aren't just related to dating. So, I can't sit here and say that everybody needs to approach a million times a week. I mean, obviously, it depends on your situation and your starting point. But, I just think that maybe for a lot of guys watching this content, you need to hit a rock bottom. Yeah, you need to hit a rock bottom with your dating life. And hopefully, you're the kind of guy that instead of becoming cynical or giving up entirely, you use that shitty period as activation or as fuel to just go charging ahead full steam, everything on the line, and do whatever it takes to sort it out. Because guys, we're talking about your romantic life. Like, this is your dating life. Yeah, like, this is, if you want kids, like, this is the kind of stuff that will allow you to meet a high value or wife worthy woman in the future who you can live life with, build a family with, build an empire with, whatever you want to do, right? And of course, there's so many benefits downstream from cold approach, which I talk about on the channel, which I'll continue to talk about on live streams in terms of character development, going after what you want, not caring about social judgment. And so there's just so much to be gained if you take that aggressive action. And I'm so glad that I used those moments of pain to like alchemize something better, something noble, something positive, right? Um, and so and yeah, so I hope hopefully if you're in that rock bottom um, moment, then this has found you at the right time, I guess, and I hope you can take some value from my journey and how I managed to elevate myself over time. But the most important thing is that you don't give up and you remain hopeful, and then you just take action, and aggressive action. Yeah, the key word there is aggressive action. And of course, you'll gain humility, which is also a really great character trait, which is earned. You don't just wake up and go, "Oh, I'm a humble guy. I'm a humble guy because I don't flaunt my success." No, that's a bullshit definition of humility. You're a humble guy when you've been kicked in the face, kicked in the teeth, and you've taken your licks. That's when you're humble, right? Because then life has really shown you that it doesn't give a fuck about you, right? And it's up to you to just get out and make things happen. So, yeah, that's my perspective on rock bottom and dating. Hopefully, you guys can make it out alive. But I'm gonna look at some comments. So obviously, Mo's in the stream. Hakan Limaz says hello, bro. Nick Arenas says hello. What's up, guys? Sarfarza says hi. What's up, Sarfarza? A guy from Russia, Dimitri. What's up? Shout out to Russia. Yeah, a couple of guys saying hi. What's up to everyone in the chat? So I'll answer Mo's first question. So Mo says, do you think you would have been as bold to quit your job if you never discovered Cold Approach? Nah, bro. I don't think I would have been bold enough to do it. Because I think, and this kind of goes to the rock bottom points that I've made earlier, but before I found Cold Approach, I was kind of playing it safe. And even though I wasn't completely happy in my career, I also wasn't completely sad. I wasn't like completely dissatisfied because I was already used to it and I'd already had a fairly settled life where I live in this town and I had my friendship group, and on paper everything was okay. The only issue was my dating life, really. But to be honest, I wasn't that happy in my job, but I just kind of accepted it, right? And even the idea of, trying to pursue another career, I would certainly entertain that idea and look at it from a sort of, let's say, future looking perspective where I'd think, okay, I might not be where I want to be right now in my career, but that's something that I can focus on later on, right? And so I was comfortable enough to the point where I didn't take proper action, but I was still fairly uneasy, right? And so Cold Approach, the thing that Cold Approach did for me was it inspired me to take a sledgehammer to all the self-limiting beliefs that I had about not just dating but career and my own ability to make more money or to travel the world or to live remotely or to move out of my town and live in a big city, right? Or to meet like-minded people like Ephraim, for example, right? And Cold Approach it was like a portal into a new world, right? It just like completely opened up my mind to what it means to go after what you want. And in the back of my mind, before Cold Approach, I always knew that I wanted a better career, but like I said, I just didn't have that activation energy or drive to actually make shit happen and make proper moves, and really take the risk, right? And so I think Cold Approach just gave me that risk taking, let's say, muscle. It really strengthened that muscle because I realized that a lot of the reasons why we don't do what we want to do is because we're scared of other people's opinions. We're scared of being rejected, and we're scared of judgment from other people. And so when you've done cold approach, you realize this judgment that I'm scared of, whether it's strangers or family or friends, it doesn't mean anything, right? And then of course when you find success through cold approach, right, you realize, wow, if I'd allowed this person's judgment, whether it's my family or my friends or my coworkers or a stranger, if I'd allowed their judgment to stop me from going for this approach, I wouldn't be in bed right now with this chick having this great time together. And like, it's so funny because every time I have a great experience through cold approach, especially the girl that I'm seeing now who I actually really like, every time I'm like, sometimes because I'm a very reflective guy, and I'll think to myself, wow, I almost didn't approach this girl, right? I almost didn't approach this girl. And if I'd allowed my fear of either her judgment or the strangers around her when I approached her at Tottenham Court Road in busy central London, if I'd allowed their opinions to stop me from approaching her and expressing my true desire, because I saw her and I was like, oh, she's attractive. I like her. I want to go say hi. If I'd allowed their opinions to stop me, I wouldn't be with her right now in this by the couch over here, cuddling up and watching movies and having a fun discussion about stuff that we find interesting. I wouldn't be there. And like, think about how powerful of a frame that is when you extrapolate and apply that to other areas of your life where you go, you know, I want to do this job, I want to make more money, I want to increase my earning potential, I want to live in this country, but I'm scared that these people will think this because maybe I'll have to take a step down in my career because I've built so much, let's say, experience in this particular sector. And so I want to go into sales, but because I don't know anything about sales, I have to start from the bottom up. And that might mean a bit of a pay cut, which means I lose a little bit of status amongst my core friendship group, or in the eyes of my parents or my family or my community, my Kenyan community, right, of aunties and uncles, whoever the person is. If I extrapolate my learnings from cold approach and I look at that and I go, but wait a minute, Ian, if I had that same mindset in cold approach, then I wouldn't be seeing the girl I'm seeing. So isn't it possible that maybe I'm leaving a lot on the table if I don't go for what I want to go for in my career, right? And so that's what that energy, that mindset from code approach, it just mapped onto my career, and I was like, fuck it, I don't care what people think, and also just my ability to take risk and handle whatever the worst case scenario is. I can handle it. Like, I can always find a way now because I've done stuff that was way harder, right? I mean, I've already spoken on videos and streams and even on FM's channel about all the shame that I grew up with and after getting rejected. Like, you guys don't understand. Like, I used to be like a harsh self-critic when it came to my self-worth in the context of dating. I did not think that I was attractive at all. I had more insecurities than probably anybody else, right? I mean, I'm not here to play the insecurity game, so I'm not going to say that. We all have our insecurities, so let me know. I'm not going to say that I had more than anybody else, but I had my fair share. Let's just say that, right? And so, those insecurities were strong. Yeah. And so the fact that I overcame that through cold approach and basically attacked the very thing that, I was so scared of, dealing with, which was that internal insecurity and shame, and then came out the other end, not just alive, but stronger, more confident, more socially capable. And then, of course, eventually saw an improvement in my dating life. Like, when you go through that journey, then like all of a sudden you wake up and you think, oh, like anything is possible. Yeah, the seemingly impossible is actually possible. Because at one point I genuinely thought that I could never attract the kind of girls that I'm attracting now. Like when I was in Thailand and I was with that Finnish girl. I mean, there's no way in a million years you could have told me 2-3 years ago that I would have met that girl and taken her out on a date the same night and then had a nice magical evening together, and then have her like thank me afterwards and be like, yeah, I had a great time, like if you're in Finland, let me know, we can go skiing. Like, it's like, what? Like, that's crazy. Yeah, like just think about how, like, not just life changing, but that just like shifts your mentality about everything. So that's essentially what. Yeah, I know I've gone on a bit of a long-winded answer there, Mo, for your first question. Um, but yeah, I definitely do not think that I would have been as bold as I was if it wasn't for Cold Approach. And then also just surround. I want to say another thing is like surrounding yourself with guys who, you know, encourage you, and guys who are also action takers, and they have that sort of zero fucks given mentality, and they also go after what they want. When you're in a room with those kind of guys like Ephraim or like Joseph, like I met Joseph in Belgrade, and they're living a life that you want to live, and you see it up front, and you hear their thoughts, and you get their perspectives, that's very powerful, right? Like you also absorb that energy through osmosis, and it affects the way that you think and move going forward. So obviously linking up with Ephraim, going from client to friend, and now we're obviously in touch and we're in the same group, and he's obviously taught me so much, and he's obviously backed me so much, and you know that relationship has been pretty big, and I think I just gained so much of my um, let's say, because confidence and risk taking ability from guys like him. Because before Cold Approach, I kind of felt as if I was the only person who had this mentality, so it was quite difficult to let's say, not difficult, but I don't know if you guys have heard of like the lonely chapter. It's something that Chris Williamson coined. It's a term he coined. But sometimes on this journey of excellence, you kind of feel like there's nobody else supporting you, because maybe your friends don't really see value in it, and your family aren't really pushing you towards anything like that. So I kind of felt like I couldn't relate to anybody, and then all of a sudden I come across Ephraim's channel, and guys like you in the school community that he used to have, and you find like-minded guys, and that can be very motivating as well. That also gives you energy to take risks, because you have guys in your corner, and so I have guys in my corner now. But yeah, Mo says, every stream I watch inspires me to keep going and not give up. So I appreciate you, Ian. Proud of you. I always believed in you, my brother. Thank you, bro. I appreciate that. Yeah, keep on going, man. Obviously you're doing the tech sales course, so I hope that keeps going well for you. And I hope you're able to get that remote job that you want. I remember that was something that you wanted months ago when I was in the free Poole University school community. So yeah, hopefully one day we'll link up, man, once you get things sorted out. And if you're gonna get coaching, obviously who I'm gonna recommend you to, the OG, Mr. Ephraim. But yeah, no, I'm glad that I'm inspiring you. I mean, that's kind of my goal here, is to speak to guys who are in a similar position that I was in, a year and a half ago, and show them that it's possible, right? Because there's a lot of content out there on the internet, all sorts of black pill content, and if it's not black pill, it's red pill, and the red pill are telling you that you have to do all these different things to be valuable, and I just vehemently disagree. I disagree, and I want my channel to be a shining example of what that disagreement looks like, and what a successful dating life can look like if you're someone like me with my experience or my background, or my history in terms of feeling like an unlovable piece of shit who couldn't get laid to save his life, right? So I think hopefully that is inspiring to anybody, and if it's inspiring to one guy, then I think it's worth it. It's worth all the trolls, it's worth the scrutiny, it's worth the judgment, um, and so I'll take all of that on the chin if it means helping somebody out, because it's so funny if you think about it. Like at one point, I'm sure Ephraim thought to himself, do I want to start a channel? Like, what am I gonna get myself into? What if people judge me? Yada yada yada. And to be fair, knowing Ephraim, maybe he didn't think that way, because I know he's a he's a savage. To be fair, but assuming he did, it's like, imagine if he decided not to make a channel, right? And then I would have never come across his content, and then I wouldn't be I don't think I'd have the dating life that I have now. Who knows? Maybe I would have found some other creator, but I resonated heavily with him. So he, like him making that decision, if you think about it, eventually allowed me to reach out to him and to change my dating life, right? So I hope that maybe I'm that same person for somebody watching right now, or watching in a week, or watching in a month, or a year, or 2 years, or whenever that person comes across it, right? And so yeah, that's essentially my more altruistic goal of the channel, apart from obviously, wanting to build a bit of a following. But yeah, those are my thoughts. If Are there any questions in the chat? I mean, there's 3 people watching. I'm happy to answer 1 or 2 questions if it's related to Cold Approach. I'm always curious to know if the people watching have approached yet, if they've been solo approaching for, a certain amount of time. That'd be cool to just get some insight into that, because it's in the UK. I'm in the UK right now. It's pretty cold, and wintertime is a fairly tough time to approach. Although I don't want to use that as an excuse, because there's a guy in the pool private community of Ephraim's community he's in a cold country right now, and he approaches like a madman. He's putting in his reps, so I guess that's not a great excuse. If he can do it, then why can't we do it? But otherwise, I don't think there's any other comments or questions. So, to the 3 people watching, I hope you have a great rest of your evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, I guess we'll catch up soon. Till the next live stream, eh? But yeah, take care, Mo. Take care, boys. And yeah, let's get it. Peace out.